Hello and welcome one and all to episode 2 of Exiled Gottomas. I am Gottomas, your forever DM and host once again for today's new episode. For those who didn't join me for episode 1, last time I described my overall thoughts and feelings about Path of Exile 2 in general. So in today's episode, I would like to start working with everyone on the current league and certain things that I have noticed over the course of 3 leagues now that I've played, as it pertains to the theory crafting and leveling aspect of said leagues, and how I have learned to adapt to the league content and game terminology that I now understand are an absolutely tremendous part of this game, coming from the perspective of a forever DM and traditionally non-Path of Exile player. So, sit back and relax, drink you a little drink, smoke you a little smoke, and let's dive in. At the dawn of this league, it was announced that GGG would be bringing us the Druid, and in addition to the new class, we'd also be getting the Talisman weapon system, alongside other content as well. But before we ever get into the theory crafting and the league start, there is something that I feel I should inform you guys of. I would hazard a guess that most of you, if not all of you, have been asked this question before. If you could have any superpowers, what would they be? And if you haven't been directly asked that before, most, if not all of you, have probably thought about it at least once in the past, to one extent or another. The reason I am bringing this up now is because throughout my entire life, I've been asked that question many, many times. From gamers I know to even my kids asking after they watched a new superhero movie. Suffice to say that I have given it a lot of thought over the years, and yet despite the amount of thought that I have given to the topic at hand, I realize that for the most part, my answer has always been the same. I would want to be a werewolf, and have the power of Colossus from the X-Men as well. In essence, a giant, silver-furred, unkillable werewolf with super strength and fur that no weapon could penetrate. So when it was announced that we could play a werewolf, and we wouldn't lose the stats of the armor or weapons we had equipped, I knew then instantly what I wanted to play, and what my league start would be. League start. Now that was a phrase that 6 months ago, I had no clue as to what it meant. I had heard the phrase numerous times over the years from other gamers that I have known, and yet for me, that concept was utterly unknown. Honestly, I can see why so many people follow build guides for their own personal league starts. In most games, if not all the games I've played previously, the thought of planning what to start playing with so I could potentially switch to another character, and then another, was a foreign concept to me. When I first started playing Path of Exile 2 in August of 2025, I was being asked by friends what my league start was going to be, and truthfully, I gave it absolutely zero thought, preferring to interact with the game as a true beginner, so I could eventually form my own thoughts on the game and how I'd be playing it in the future. To me, most video games only had so many builds that were both fun and viable. So the concept of playing a character just to start with was completely foreign to me. However, by the end of point 3, I had at least come up with a working definition of what that term actually meant to me. A league start, for me, as a huge theory crafter and forever DM, means that you have figured out what your first character to play in the current league will be. And while it might not be the character that you want to play the most, it needs to be a character strong enough to first get through the story and into the endgame, but also enjoyable enough to play long enough to farm up currency and items to make the viability of any future builds become that much easier, especially for anyone that likes to play multiple characters in builds. This core terminological principle was and is an essential aspect of Path of Exile 2, and so it should never be overlooked, for the simple reason that some builds come online later than others and vice versa. Let me reiterate that. Some builds, despite being good builds or bad builds, come online, meaning simply that they come into their power at different points of progression throughout the game. Some builds are more early game designed, with their power reaching sort of a plateau or falling off into the endgame. And on the converse, some builds are fairly weak in the beginning of the game, and only really get strong at the very end. Learning this aspect of Path of Exile was the first huge epiphany I had in my journey of learning how to first become good at this game, and it is an invaluable tool to have in any player's kit. Whether it is a build you thoroughly enjoy and hope to play into the endgame, or whether you are simply using your League Start build as a powerful way to start farming currency so you can buy the items you need for another. These choices make a huge difference on how enjoyable the League could be, and this is a decision that all Path of Exile 2 players must make. Interestingly enough, whether they as players realized it or not. Oh, and one last thing I should mention about this process is that it is totally up to the player when they want to shift off their League Start. Whether that be early in Act 2 or T15 maps, the decision is one of the key ingredients necessary for continuously having a wonderful time no matter the current league. Another piece of terminology that I'd not only familiarize myself with, but is integral to understanding this game as it's at its most basic level, and one that you must do in a game like this to keep the game fresh and entertaining, is personal win condition. Now, once again, if you haven't played this game before, a personal win condition is something that you would have no concept of. Gottomas, what do you mean by a personal win condition, you might ask me? And since this term is something that is really important to a player's overall enjoyment of the game, let me try and be thorough in my explanation. A win condition is the technical term for something that, when fulfilled, it means you have won or beaten the game. In some cases, this can mean you, as the player, have completed the main storyline of the game. And honestly, in many games, that's exactly the win condition, and the only win condition that is actually present in that particular game. In other games, it could mean that you beat the last boss, or that you collected the final item, or even solved the last puzzle. All of these are technically win conditions. However, this game presents you with a different issue. In this game, you as the player must set your own win conditions. No one else can do it, and your win conditions and mine could be completely different. Different to the point where your win conditions' core concepts can even be completely the opposite of mine. In this game, it is up to you to decide at what point you have achieved the final goal that you set for yourself at the start of the league. Your win condition could be as simple as completing the entire story with one or more characters. Or it could be that you built one or more characters all the way to level 100. Or it could be that you have beaten all of the Uber bosses that are present in this league, and that's what you set out to do. Or it could be all of the above, or even a mixture of the above. This is why I say that you will hear the term personal win condition thrown about fairly often. And whether you enjoy theory crafting or not, these decisions will play a huge part in shaping what you think of the league and whether or not you want to continue playing in it, or in my case, decide you want to make some content about it. This personal decision of selecting a win condition affects everyone equally, and certainly influences a person's enjoyment levels across the leagues pretty heavily. So, having said all of that, let's get back to our story in the start of point 4. Once the devs had released the information on the league, and we knew that we were getting a werewolf as one of the features for point 4, I knew instantly what my league start was going to be. It only made sense considering my own personal affection for the werewolf or lichen trope. I even decided on Oracle for my ascension due to 3 main reasons. 1, it seemed to go against the meta as far as I could tell based on all the chatter online around the league. And as I stated in episode 1, I rather like being an anti-meta player. 2, the developers had mentioned how many extra passive nodes the Oracle Ascendancy was going to get, and one of the most dangerous things you can do in any game is to give an avid theory crafter more and more ways to customize their character. And finally, the last and possibly the most important reason was to me, and honestly that was the Oracle's Ascension ability, Moment of Vulnerability. When I saw this in the game release footage, it made sense to me, thematically, that a werewolf with supernatural senses would be able to do something like this. And so thematically, it was simply too perfect to pass up. Now, I feel like this is as good a place as any to demonstrate and talk about the process a forever DM goes through when theory crafting any new character for a game like this. Weirdly, this story begins at an ending and it ends at the beginning. For most DMs that I know, especially the forever kind, when they go to help their less experienced players roll a new character, they'll ask them, "What do you want your character to do?" Notice anything funny about that question? It's very similar to the question I mentioned earlier about superpowers. We do this so that you can share with us your unadulterated vision, which in part will usually give us an idea of what you would want the character to be able to do at the height of their powers. If you can give your DM the final vision, usually as long as it's within the rules of the game, they can tell you how to get there and what build path needs to be taken, what classes to pick, and what weapons or spells to use to help create the perfect image of the character that you have given them. For me, in this instance, my vision was clear. I wanted a werewolf pack leader darting around the map with my wolf pack, tearing apart enemies that we saw with claw and fang, healing so fast and being heavily armored enough with our supernatural might that we could shrug off all but the mightiest blows, and being nimble enough still to be able to dodge those attacks whenever they actually were strong enough to wound me. Now I had my image, and GGG had told me that there was a new notable passive node coming that would allow me to use a talisman and a scepter at the same time. This gave me my first real build point to shoot for and helped form the foundation of my build path, simply by having my core concept down and one node on the outside of the tree. That would take me several levels to get to, not just one or two or five, but quite a few. Now my path lay open and ready for me to explore. This, in essence, and in as simple terms as I can state, is how a DM builds so many characters each and every campaign and play session. See the end goal and then build towards that end goal. And as short a number of steps as possible, being as efficient as possible, and using any and all tools available to facilitate the end goal. While it might seem almost mystical to some, with some creativity and with the willingness to adapt the build as new options present themselves, theory crafting moves from a terrible chore into something much more, dare I even say, enjoyable. Some people will probably disagree, but personally I find it very enjoyable. I have to say here that I couldn't be happier with what I chose for my league start, as it completely sated the desire I have to play the werewolf. This level of fun I was experiencing and the appreciation I was feeling were yet more reasons that I became inspired to create this channel and to share with y'all my adventures in Wraeclast. Because I felt, and I still feel like they absolutely nailed it. And I have to admit that I was and still am pleasantly surprised with how good the developers made the werewolf. In fact, even though I haven't played any of the other shapeshifted forms, I really need to say once again how well GGG did in bringing this trope to life. Based on any and all community feedback I have heard about the various talisman forms, they were all winners. So now that I had my core character concept down pat and I had my league start planned, it was time to actually begin to take on the challenge and once again rise amongst my fellow exiles in defense of Wraeclast. In Act 1, I was honestly surprised at how fluid the wolf already felt and how powerful the basic attack shred was. Let me reiterate, the basic attack was not only viable, but upon opening with a series of tests, was obviously a very powerful option, which I was already in shock and awe of how well GGG had implemented the very thing that I most wanted the werewolf to be good at. And here they were doing it better than I'd imagined. I swear someone in GGG read my mind on exactly how I would have made the werewolf's basic attack feel. Also, for anyone who is not aware, having a basic attack that is anything but absolutely worthless is something that I know from my own experience, at least, is a super rare thing. One of the coolest things I can remember about the original Final Fantasy VII all those years ago was when it came time for the end game and the Emerald and Ruby weapons had been unleashed upon the land. If you wanted to fight the Ruby weapon and actually have a chance to win the battle, then you would unequip whatever your current most powerfully built out sword on Cloud was, and that you'd been using for the longest time in the highest levels of content in the game. And instead, you would re-equip your most basic sword. In fact, it was your very first weapon you got to fight with in the game, the Buster Sword. In literally almost all games I've played, whether they be video games, board games, or card games, the basic attack was something that players used only as long as they had to, and then players would switch it out at their very first opportunity as they gained levels and gear. In fact, in most games that I've played over the course of my life, once you got rid of that first weapon or basic ability, players would never, and I mean never, go back and try to make something out of it, unless they were forced to. And then they'd be all kinds of pissed with due justification, because in all of those games, the basic attack or first level ability was completely and utterly useless. Almost immediately, I realized that unlike the warrior, whose slams were, while impactful and would do lots of damage, the slams were so slow to actually perform that there was very little you could do to change that feeling and make something that played differently while still in melee. The druid, on the other hand, with the talismans equipped and wolf form selected, could make a pounce into combat, cross slash back out of combat, and then they could actually jump immediately back in due to the movement speed and reach of the basic attack. Add to that the second attack you unlocked, Lunar Assault, which was basically a beautiful half moon mini frost AoE that felt as if it had massive bonuses to freeze the enemy. And combat seems super simple and intuitive to chain and make flow. And those two types of attacks together made a simple yet devastating combo. After beating Count Geonor once again, I was thrilled at how well the wolf form played. And to be honest, the in-game knowledge I had gotten in point 3 about what story bosses need what type of resistance, what gear I should be keeping an eye out for, how defensive stacking actually worked mechanically in this game, and what items were actually good for the level I was at. Act 1 became easy on the difficulty, and yet still rewarding and exciting in the execution thanks to the interactions with my new werewolf build. Once again, I'd blasted through Act 1, but this time it was much easier and faster than I had previously done, and I wasn't even trying to speedrun. I would literally just try to freeze whatever enemies were in front of me as quickly as possible with Lunar Assault, and then I would focus primarily on using the werewolf's inherent dashes both in and out of combat to focus as much as I could on Shred, as it felt the most purely thematic choice when considering how a werewolf would fight, or at least how the werewolf in my mind would fight. I also tried to push my energy shield and life regen as much as possible in the passive skill tree, in an attempt to make it feel as tough and resilient as the wolf in my mind. And soon I was blasting my way through the slog of Act 2. It was here that I ran into my first real problem with the build concept that I had. Since this was a league start, I had not been able to put much of anything into my stash, obviously, and so I was really starting to experience the pinch of not getting jeweler's orbs or support skill gems, or anything skill related for that matter. So, despite wanting to hyper-focus on just the werewolf's abilities and only those abilities, I was soon forced to adapt and try out some of the different skill options in the meantime. What I played was fun, and certainly I feel it was easier thanks in part to how I theory craft. However, as soon as I could switch to nothing but my wolf skills, I did. I gotta say that GGG made this part very interesting though, as I began trying to experiment with the spells contained in staffs, temporarily at least, and then I tried out some of the other primal spells like Tornado and Entangle, all the while continued to work my way up the passive skill tree towards Lord of the Wilds as fast as I possibly could. For those of you who don't know, Lord of the Wilds allows a character to wield a talisman in one hand and a scepter in the other. The character idea that I kept seeing in my mind had me leading a massive werewolf/wolf pack, and so as quickly as I could get to it, I did. And at the same time, I began trying to get some sort of scepter, looking and hoping to find something good. I got lucky once actually checking in one of the local vendors, which cannot be reiterated enough. always, always check your vendors if you haven't in a little while. They actually do carry good things. But upon visiting this one and checking in, I found a low level scepter that had like a 135 spirit roll, which at the time felt like it was nearly infinite. And thus, all at once, as soon as I got the spirit skill gem, I had my wolf pack running around and fighting with me. And thus, by the end of Act 2 and the defeat of Jamin Ra, I was totally playing in the exact style that I'd wished to play on League Start, and exactly the type of character I'd envisioned. I had my wolf pack jumping in and biting, tearing enemies to pieces, and I myself was able to jump in right alongside them in a perfect blend of absolute beauty, with shining wolves and moonlight filling the screen, and terrible carnage as my pack and myself shredded everything in sight. It was gruesome, and yet truly beautiful to behold in the elegance of its violence, and an experience that I really thought that I would never get to have in a video game. Once again, this game had brought as much to the table as D&D 3.5 did, and once again I was in shock and awe at the level of customization and character development that I was experiencing. With my alpha wolf leading his pack, I once again faced down the dreaded Jamin Ra and his horrible lightning attacks. However, unlike my league start in point 3 this time, though, I crushed him on my first attempt. And after that fight, I'm sure I was glowing every bit as much as my character had been with the satisfaction of how well the wolf and wolf pack played. I pushed into Act 3 with no rest and no retcon being performed on my character, and this time I was able to commit acts of a horrible silver simian genocide with extreme prejudice, with my wolves keeping that stupid monkey busy enough to make dodging his all-encompassing one-shot attacks simple. Truthfully, this was a level of power that none of my other builds in the previous patch had attained by this point in time, and so I was off to the races, clearing maps as fast as I could, running through them with my wolves running alongside me, ripping apart any and all transgressors to shreds. By the time I had gotten to the end of Act 3, when it was time for me to do battle with Doriani, I had received my first insanely lucky drop in the game to date. For those of you who watched my first video, you may remember me talking about how I hated the fact that you really need a powerful weapon in Path of Exile 2, no matter what level character you have. The impact is too important, and it truly makes the feel of a build that much different. It's one thing I just don't like about this game, and I hope they somehow balance a little bit better. This time, on this playthrough though, I got lucky. And on one of my many backtracking expeditions across a map to make sure that I hadn't missed anything, I got my lucky drop. And for those of you with small children listening, or who might be offended by a bit of bad language, feel free to skip forward for just a minute or two while I adequately paint the picture for those still here. Now, for those of you still listening, one thing you really need to know about me is that when I was born, whatever powers that be that are governed by the dreaded RNG goddess had ordained that I would be a special case. They deemed it necessary to replace the L in my luck with an F. And in fact, a buddy of mine who I used to play D&D with once said to me, "Gottomas, you're the only man I've ever met whose luck was so bad that you could fall into a barrel of titties and wind up sucking a dick." I never get lucky drops. Ever. Ever. In fact, that's one of the reasons I became good at theory crafting and build planning in the first place. I was always having to make up for my bad luck in any sort of gaming environment. But on that day, running back just to full clear the map that I was on, deep in the jungles of Act 3, I saw a pile of stacked rocks that I had missed from my first time passing that way. And sure enough, when I opened the stack of rocks, there it was. A rare talisman. A rare talisman with +6 to all melee skills, no less. This time, when I stopped playing for the day, it was neither due to feeling elated and having the satisfaction of a job well done, or a level well played, and it wasn't even because I was tired and needing to rest my hands and my brain. Instead, when I turned off the computer that day, it was in the superstitious hope that my computer wasn't going to catch fire and explode due to me using up all of my luck at once and finding that talisman. The next day, though, when I woke up and realized my computer was still functional and didn't burn my house down, it was time to proceed through the story, and with my lucky weapon being put to full use, I cleared the rest of Act 3 and tore into Act 4. In fact, I think I made such rapid progress that, like, only a day passed by, and I was rocking and rolling into the interludes, and then finally into the endgame. Something that I am sure a lot of you experience yourself is what I like to call character ADD. Here I was with my character destroying all that came before him, and yet I was already feeling that itch, that insane theory crafting urge to build another character before I had even fully completed this one. I decided that day that while I was enjoying my Alpha Wolf Pack leader, it wasn't quite as much fun as I thought it would be. In fact, I've now realized that I think it's more fun either playing in the more lone wolf style, just shredding through levels by yourself, just so stupidly powerful that you don't need a pack. You are the leader and you are the immortal warrior. Or I'd rather just be helping my army by buffing them, cursing the enemy, using plants to hold them down while my army of wolves and minions just swarmed over them like army ants. And while the hybrid playstyle was really enjoyable, I was really starting to wish then, though, that I was better at one thing or the other. So with that in my mind, I did two things as soon as I had farmed just a bit of currency in the end game. I even went so far as to go up to tier 7 maps just to gather said currency, and then I pulled the trigger. I re-rolled my Alpha Wolf into a Lone Wolf build, prioritizing Lunar Blessing and Shred with my new favorite skill for tearing into a boss, Feral Invocation, socketed with Cross Slash. Now, after running through a map and building up energy simply by using my abilities naturally, I could unleash all of the rage and power that I've been building up all at once and literally tear the opponent limb from limb. Simply put, freeze the boss with Shred and Lunar Blessing, and then activate the near instantaneous unleashes of 16 casts of Cross Slash in such rapid succession that the boss never even had a chance to break the freeze debuff. Seriously, if you haven't tried that combo on the Wolf, I thoroughly recommend trying it out as soon as possible. It's like Wolverine did a bunch of cocaine, and then right at the peak of his drug-fueled psychosis, unleashed Berserker Barrage. Simply fucking glorious. But now that I had my Lone Wolf build complete minus the final levels and gear needed to full clear Arbiter and Atziri and T-15s, it was time to scratch that theory crafting itch again, and so it was time for me to roll another character to satiate that desire that I had to go full minions with some plant-based support that I had gotten to experience and play around with earlier in this playthrough. That, however, is a tale best reserved for another day. And so I think that is just about all the time we've got for today's episode. As I said earlier, today's story begins at an ending and ends at a beginning. Please join me next time for episode 3 and the continued journey of a Forever DM's adventures in Wraeclast and the next character build that I just couldn't wait to create. As always, if you enjoyed the content, please like and subscribe to the channel, and feel free to drop a comment down below. You might even want to share with a theory crafter you might think that they might find it enjoyable. And if you do decide to do so, know that I'm very thankful. I am Gottomas, your Forever DM, wishing you a great day and much luck in your own theories, builds, and grinds. Thanks one and all for joining me, and I'll see you again next time on Exiled Gottomas.